Tigers. My name is Mandy Curran, and I am the Program Specialist at the Kansas Wetlands Education Center, which is owned and operated by Fort Hays State University, and with a special partnership with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. I wanted to share my hobby for tigers, which is bird watching. Now, the Kansas Wetlands Education Center is located at Cheyenne Bottoms, which is the largest marsh in the interior of the United States. So it's really cool that it's right here in the middle of landlocked Kansas. And it's a great place to go and watch birds and to become a bird watcher. So before we get into maybe how to become a better bird watcher, I want to virtually fly you to the bottoms and introduce you to our wetland.
You wouldn't expect it from a sea of grass. No, not to harbor an ocean of water. It's a paradox. More than 60 square miles of perpetual wetlands in America's heartland prairie. But it's a place well known to winged travelers who course the ancient skyways between summer and winter homes. It's a great oasis that calls them down to feed and rest. And it's a treasure of Kansas. Cheyenne Bottoms, famed through history as a wondrous resource, wildlife haven, and hunting ground, is first and foremost a natural harbor for interior migrants. And it's not just ducks and geese. Thousands of shorebirds use Cheyenne Bottoms as a staging area during spring and fall migrations. At least 350 of the 475 bird species reported in Kansas have been seen in this premier 41,000-acre natural land sink. Perching birds, wading birds, seabirds, aerialists, waterfowl, raptors. All these and others offer spectacular viewing opportunities during seasonal flights. Cheyenne Bottoms is the largest wetland complex in the interior United States and holds designations as a Wetlands of International Importance, a Western Hemispheric Shorebird Reserve Site, and a globally important bird area by various bird conservation groups. And birders from across the continent and world visit to witness its annual bird movements across the Central Flyway.
Right. In North America, there are 4 migratory corridors that birds use to for migration. So in the winter, when they head south, especially a lot of the birds that are traveling through Cheyenne Bottoms, they'll spend their winters in Mexico, Central America, South America. Some of our birds are even flying as far as kind of the coast of Chile. And then in the spring, they're coming through the bottoms and they're going to Canada, Alaska, and the Arctic Circle. And so the 4 migratory corridors were located in the Central Flyway. And within the Central Flyway, Great Bend, Kansas, the Cheyenne Bottoms is located right in the middle of Kansas. So if we kind of get a better bird's eye view of what Cheyenne Bottoms looks like, that 41,000 acres really stands out as a target for those migratory birds. So we don't have a lot of, we don't have any coasts, we don't have any oceans, there's not a lot of bodies of water that can be seen, and so we definitely stand out as a target. But as a wetland, and we are a wetland of international importance, it's important that there are lots of habitats that connect these birds through their migration. So we're only one of a chain of really important habitats for those migrating birds. And we're fortunate that just about 30 miles south of us is another wetland of international importance called Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. Another really great place in Kansas, not far from Fort Hays, to go and really practice the hobby of bird watching. Now within that 41,000 acres, about 20,000 acres is owned by the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. About 8,000 acres is owned by the Nature Conservancy, and both of these groups kind of have different conservation strategies, management techniques, and they attract a wide variety of birds. The Kansas Wetlands Education Center sits on the edge of the wildlife area, and then Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge are connected by the Wetlands and Wildlife National Scenic Byway. So that 41,000 acres, it's a natural basin area, kind of a land sink, created by the underlying salt layers kind of dissolving as that fresh water came in, and really caused the land to kind of sink in, and it naturally collects water. And we receive all of our water, we're freshwater marsh. We receive our water from surface runoff and also coming in from streams, creeks, and nearby rivers. So again, what's the big deal? Why would you come to Cheyenne Bottoms to birdwatch? So of the 475 species that can be seen in Kansas, bird species, over 350 have been documented in Cheyenne Bottoms. And we're really known for our shorebirds. And when you think about shorebirds, they are birds that mostly live on a shore. So they're traveling from oceans and coastlines and migrating through. And we do have some birds that this is where they migrate to, and this is where the shorebird will stay here year-round, or not year-round, but stay here and lay their eggs and nest and raise their young here. But you can see a lot of different shorebirds depend on Cheyenne Bottoms, and so that's a really good place to become a bird watcher. So there are 41 shorebird species that have actually been documented in Cheyenne Bottoms, and these are a couple. Now, pay attention to some of the birds I show you, give you their names, because when we get to kind of a how to be a good bird watcher and kind of a quiz portion, some of these birds may come back into focus. And so shorebirds are known for having amazing migration stories. They'll fly thousands and thousands of miles to get to their breeding and nesting grounds, and then again where they winter. And what brings these shorebirds to Cheyenne Bottoms? These are bloodworms, and a statistic I really like to share is in the month of June we can find over 64,000 of these bloodworms in every square meter of the mud and the muck at Cheyenne Bottoms, and they're the larvae of a midgefly, and that's what's bringing a lot of these birds in. And the shorebirds especially have these little sewing machine beaks that they use to probe the mud, go up and down, and they're searching for their food. So aquatic invertebrates, mostly those bloodworms, maybe some dragonfly, mayfly larvae. And this is a place where as they go on their migration, they stop, they rest, they refuel. A shorebird will need to kind of double its body weight before it can go on the rest of its migration journey. So again, a couple of different shorebirds that we have in our area. We will have some, the killdeer, which is up here, and the snowy plover down in the bottom right-hand corner. They will nest in the bottoms, as well as American avocets, black-necked stilts, and then this bird, which is called a Wilson's phalarope. This is a really fun bird to travel to the bottoms to see. Now what they do, they have a special unique adaptation where they spin around in circles, kind of like a little top, and what they're doing is they're creating a cyclone or a vortex that will actually pull up the aquatic invertebrates off of the bottom of the floor, and and they can just take their little needle-like beaks and pick up the aquatic inverts for their food source. All right, I've shared some statistics as how important Cheyenne Bottoms is to these shorebirds. And if you combine the two middle migratory corridors, the Central Flyway, which we're located in, with the Mississippi Flyway, you get what's called the Mid-Continental Flyway. And these are one bird of note, the Hudsonian godwit. 100% of their population uses the Mid-Continental Flyway in the spring season as they make their way up north to their breeding grounds. And so this Hudsonian godwit has a really incredible migration story. So it will take off from this coast of Chile, and a student, Jennifer Linscott from South Carolina University, put GPS trackers on 25 of these birds and then watched where they took off. And one bird of note flew for 6 straight days. So didn't stop, nonstop flight for 6 days from the coast of Chile to Cheyenne Bottoms, Kansas. And so imagine if that bird had flown and flown, hadn't stopped, finally got to where it was going to be able to rest, refill its energy, eat for a couple days before it takes off on the rest of its journey, and Cheyenne Bottoms or Quivira National Wildlife Refuge was not there. And so again, wetlands are crucial habitat to these migrating birds. Now, a lot of people ask, when's the best time to come and visit Cheyenne Bottoms, especially for bird watching? To get the most diversity, you want to come at the end of April or early May, but you can see birds all year round. It just depends on what kind of birds you want to see. So the shorebirds, really end of April, they really pick up with their numbers, but then they actually, a lot of them will start their fall migration back as early as July and August. And so they take a lot longer to kind of head back on their way in the fall to their wintering grounds. But you can see birds no matter what time of year you come out to Cheyenne Bottoms. So if you're more interested in waterfowl, the time of year to come would be fall and winter to see birds like ducks and geese. And so we've got huge numbers of ducks. These are just a few of the birds that you might see out at Cheyenne Bottoms, a few of the duck species. If you want to see wading birds, they are really most populous in the summer. The American avocet, this is a really neat bird. It's the bird on the Kansas Wetlands Education Center logo, and this really long up-curved bill, a unique feeding strategy it has is it kind of tips its bill side to side and sweeps it, picking up the aquatic inverts, maybe some crustaceans, fish, frogs, for eating there. So a couple more wading birds. We have 3 different egret species that visit the bottoms, and then great blue herons can be seen almost any time of year. Some other really cool birds that visit Cheyenne Bottoms. The rarest bird in North America, also the tallest bird in North America, is the whooping crane, and they stand at about 5.5 feet tall. And Cheyenne Bottoms in Quivira is one of the only places in Kansas that you can guarantee to see them. And if you want to see them, their fall migration, they spend a little bit more time resting when they do stop. And end of October, very early November is a good time of year to spot them. And they do migrate with the sandhill cranes. So I said whooping cranes are kind of rare. At one point their numbers were as low as 16 birds left in the world, and today their numbers are a little over 700. So definitely still an endangered species, but they are making a recovery. But they travel with sandhill cranes, which are very numerous, and their numbers are in the thousands when they travel. But they'll fly over, and especially middle March, we can kind of hear their little cackle as they fly over. And so that whooping crane, they spend their winters in Aranassus, Texas, in a wildlife refuge there, and then they're heading up to the Arctic for their breeding grounds. All right, just quickly before we get into kind of the bird watching, I just want to introduce the Kansas Wetlands Education Center to you and hope that you can come and visit us. And it's a really good place that if you want to test your bird watching hobby out, you can come and stop at our center. get a map of the bottoms, look at our board to see which birds have been spotted. We can give tips as the best place to go and see those birds. And also we provide field trips. So if you're in kind of a biology or natural resource related course, ask your teacher if we can provide a program for you, or even a field trip or a research opportunity. And we do hire 4 graduate assistants each semester, and they help take care of our classroom animals. We have about 30 animals we use as ambassadors to kind of teach about the wetlands. So varies between, we've got some owls and prairie dogs and amphibians, so toads and frogs and reptiles, snakes and lizards. We've got just some really neat opportunities for our graduate assistants to do their research, but then also help out in our visitor center, help take care of our animals, and also help take care of some programming needs, helping with camps and school groups that come and visit. So reach out to us and ask us for more information if that sounds like something you might be interested in.
Education Center on your next family adventure. Walk through our state-of-the-art interactive exhibits. Meet the critters that are native to the Cheyenne Bottoms, the largest marsh in the interior of the United States. Take a tour and have your breath taken away as thousands of shorebirds or waterfowl take flight. Just 10 miles northeast of Great Bend, experience the Kansas Wetlands Education Center and escape into the panoramic view we call home. Visit our website for more information and upcoming events.
All right, so the mission of the Kansas Wetlands Education Center is to educate the public about wetland communities, their importance, and their need for conservation and restoration. So let's get into the bird watching and how to become a good bird watcher. And it's a great hobby. It can be very addictive. I'm going to share at the end a lot of different resources that you could use to become a better bird watcher and to get some of those skills. But one of them is to just join a network of people who are also bird watchers. There's a really good Facebook page called Kansas Birding, and people will post the birds that they see, and especially kind of rare and interesting birds. They're called lifers if you get a new bird that you've never seen before, have never documented before, and so people are always posting their lifers, which might be a rare or unique bird that comes into Kansas, and ones that people definitely want to see. And as you're just starting, there can be great birds just in your own backyard also. This morning I was looking out at my bird feeder, and I just kept calling them these little yellow balls bouncing around on the ground, and they were goldfinches. And so just really pretty birds. Orioles are coming in right now. They're bright orange and black and really stand out. And I'll talk at the end also about how you could attract different birds to your backyard. So let's talk about this addictive hobby called bird watching. So bird watching really relies on your sense of observation, just paying attention to what's out there, and even trees along maybe your walk to class or in your backyard. What can you see and what can you observe? And so you want to look for a couple of different characteristics, because some birds are very similar looking, and characteristics like just the colors of the feathers. Now, one thing to note is some birds experience sexual dimorphism, which means the male looks different than the female. They have different characteristics, and a lot of times the female of the species may be more drab and dull looking, and that's so that she can sit on her nest and protect her eggs and be camouflaged, and so the female will look very different from the male. You want to look at the size of the bird, the shape of the bird, especially at Cheyenne Bottoms. You can't get right up on some of the birds, and so we'll talk about using binoculars here kind of in a little bit, maybe scopes, but sometimes those birds are so far away that you identify them just by kind of their silhouette and their shape. Looking at their bills and beaks and also their legs and feet can tell you about the bird. What habitat they're placed in is important. So would this bird be found in a wetland like Cheyenne Bottoms, or would they be found more in a wooded tree area? Would you find them on fence posts or electrical lines? And so really looking at, is the bird that I think I'm looking at in the correct habitat? And then also different behaviors, like those Wilson's phalaropes I showed. So their behavior is to spin around in circles. So if you see a bird doing that on the water, especially in a large flock, you can maybe identify the bird by its behavior. And then I'll also talk here at the end about kind of using field guides and how to identify birds kind of with those characteristics. So do the characteristics compare to what the field guide says that they are? All right, so let's practice. I'm going to show just a really quick snippet of a bird. And so really look for some of those things. Look, do any colors stand out? Is it showing, so basically the picture I'm going to show you is kind of like a snapshot of what you might see through the lens of some binoculars. So look for some identifying characteristics, color, bill shape, but it's going to be just a real quick snippet of picture that I give you. All right, so on this bird, we only saw a portion of its wing. And did anything stand out? And so as you are looking, maybe you noticed that really bright red wing patch. And so while all of these birds are have black in them, did a color stand out? And hopefully that red patch of the red-winged blackbird kind of stood out in your mind. And so again, the female of the species of a red-winged blackbird looks very different. They're more brownish so that they can hide in the cattails. That's where they'll nest, is they'll build little nests in the reeds and the grasses around kind of water areas, not necessarily a wetland, but maybe a pond or ditch birds a lot of times. And so the female is going to look a lot different, but really kind of looking at some of those characteristics. Now, if you're trying to identify some of those other birds, you can look again at kind of tail length. The bird here has a very long tail that hangs up, as well as, so that grackle has a much longer tail than the brown-headed cowbird in the top corner. So again, looking at things like maybe how do they hold their wings. Some birds, so looking at the robin, their wings are going to stop before the end of their tail, but other birds, their wings may hang out past their tail. And so just looking at all different characteristics of the bird. So these are all kind of perching birds. Their feet are designed for maybe sitting on twigs or being in the grass to kind of scare up insects. So feet can be a huge indicator as to what kind of bird it is as well. All right, so another quick little snapshot of a bird. And that was maybe one I'd already introduced to you again before. So this time kind of looking at shape. Had that longer neck, but this bird has a really long neck as well, but their feet are a little bit different. So more of that wading shorebird, whereas this one's really definitely a swimming shorebird. Killdeer have a fascinating story. If you've never heard of the killdeer, they don't kill deer. They get their name from the call they make. We'll talk about calls in a little bit also, because you can use calls to identify different birds, but they'll go kill dee 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 dee, and it's very, very loud. They lay their nests in the worst possible places. They lay their nests on the ground, or eggs on the ground, lay their eggs on the ground. They don't actually build a nest. They might pile up some rocks, but the eggs have a very pointed tip so that they don't roll away. They'll just kind of spin in a circle instead of roll off of, into a sidewalk or something. But because they're camouflaged with rocks, they'll lay their eggs on gravel roads, driveways. We have one often at the center right by our sidewalk where people enter and walk by every day. But their adaptation is if you get too close to their nest, they'll act like an injured bird. It's called a broken wing display, and they'll take their wing and they'll act like they're hurt and make it look like they're very easy prey and lure you or a predator away from their nest. So again, looking at behaviors is a way to identify the birds. So the bird that was in this picture, it was one I've already introduced to you, that Wilson's phalarope. You might identify it by behavior. You might identify it by color. Again, we talked about differences between males and females, but there are also differences between time of year that you might see the bird. And so they have what's called a breeding plumage. And so the male, and sometimes females, especially shorebirds, females tend to be the more striking, bright colors because they might attract multiple mates. But that breeding plumage will be during breeding season, so usually early spring into the summer. And then in the fall, their colors go more drab. And so like this American avocet has this rust-colored head. that's a breeding plumage. In the winter, their head goes white, and they look just like black and white. You know, you've taken the cartoonness out of them, and they look just like black and white cartoons without the color. And so very interesting to see the differences between, you know, not just males and females, but also spring and winter coloration with that. So it can be hard to be a bird watcher because there are lots of different things to take into consideration. Also, a first-year male, like an immature bird, is going to look different than the adult as well. So lots of different things to learn when bird watching. So the best thing to do is to just get out into the field, take a field guide with you, and practice, practice, practice. All right, so that bird was the Wilson's phalarope. All right, here's our next snapshot of a bird. All right, this time if you were looking just for white, you're going to be out of luck because all of these are white birds. That I mentioned, we have 3 egret species that visit the bottoms. So it probably wasn't an American white pelican, right? But that one comes to Cheyenne Bottoms too. A lot of people are like, you can see pelicans in Kansas. So Cheyenne Bottoms is a great place to come to see pelicans in Kansas. So our 3 egret species, we have a snowy egret, a great egret, and a cattle egret. And they each have some different things that stand out. So if I go back, can you tell it was one of the egrets? Which one? So if I come back, this time I want to look at feet. If you notice, our snowy egret, they have yellow feet, or we call them yellow slippers, and they really stand out. So they've got black legs, but bright yellow feet, whereas the cattle egret, or the great egret, black legs, black feet. Cattle egret, they're typically found around cattle, but not always. They kind of stand around and wait for the cattle to walk and stir up those insects, but they've got kind of this rust-colored crest on them. But, oh, look at the bill, another difference. Black bill, cattle egret, gray egret, oops, yellow bill. Ooh, where did they go? Okay, so that was a snowy egret. So our next little snippet of a bird, again, some colors maybe stand out. I saw a green head, but the mallard, the northern shoveler, the wood duck, they all have a green head as well. And so really take your time. This one can maybe be identified by, it's got multiple colors. Another, again, bird watching can be hard, so just get out in the field and practice, practice, because especially ducks, they're going to look different from when they're sitting on the surface of the water to where they're flying. And so being able to identify birds in flight and birds swimming. Also, there are different ducks, the way they feed can be a way to kind of tell them apart. So there's dabbling ducks that will just, when they feed, they stick just their heads in the water and their little butts are sticking up. And then a diving duck will submerge their whole body in the water and dive down to the, you know, the marsh floor to feed. And so kind of looking at those behaviors as well. So that was a northern shoveler, kind of green head, rust-colored body there on the side. Very beautiful birds. Very much stand up. They get that name northern shoveler because of the shape of their bill, like kind of like shovel-like. So it's big and huge for scooping up food. Wood ducks, very, very pretty. This one's kind of hunkered down, hunched up, but they've got like this really nice little crest off of their head. Quick little snippet, and we've got 4 gray birds to identify. So how would you pick that one out? So again, this one, all their bills seem to be pretty much the same. So really nice long bills. Something to look at is you've got colors, wing tips can stand out as well. So especially when they're flying, you can see those wing tips. Maybe looking for different colors on the head. Again, shape of bill, colors of feet, colors of legs. So that was a great blue heron. So lots of different things to look for when bird watching. There's another little bird, a beautiful bird that comes to visit the bottoms. Very iridescent in colors. Again, if you go to bill shape this time, so really long bill, but how does it curve? This one kind of curves down, so we can take out American avocet because their bill curves up. A Wimbrel, they have a bill that curves down also, but maybe go and look again at shape and size. The Virginia rail, they're very, very small birds and very seclusive. And if you saw a Virginia rail, which you can see them, it's just more unlikely, but you're more likely to hear them than see them. So that was our white-faced ibis. So lots of different birds out at Cheyenne Bottoms. I'm going to give you a few more techniques and some tips here in just a minute. One tool you might need to be a bird watcher are binoculars. And binoculars can come in all different price ranges, different settings. For bird watchers, it's recommended, I don't know if you can see how well you can see this, is to get ones that are 8 by 42, and that just means that it will have it 8 times magnified from what you see now, and then the 44 is how many millimeters the size of the lenses are to let in optimal light. So an 8 by 42 is kind of what's recommended for bird watching. So to use binoculars, so these ocular lenses, these happen to be collapsible. If you wear glasses, it might be more comfortable to keep the lenses, the ocular lenses, collapsed. If you don't wear glasses, you might kind of pull those out. The diopter adjustment, kind of located right here next to the ocular, the collapsible eye cups, is for making sure both eyes kind of have the same amount of focus. And the way you would set that diopter adjustment is you want to start with it kind of at a 0 and then cover up with the lens cap the side that the diopter adjustment focuses on, and then look at something. So you want to cover that lens cap so you're not squinting your eye or closing one eye, because when you squint, your eye focus is a little bit different. So you cover that one eye cup and look at something in the distance, and then this middle focus button, so this middle focus adjustment piece, you want to make sure that whatever you see far away has a good focus. Then to kind of get that adjustment for both eyes, you can take that lens cap off, take this one off, or put that one on, and you're not going to touch your focus button here in the center. So that's going to assure that both eyes kind of see the same thing, and then you can use that diopter adjustment to get a good clean image with that. And then you should be able to, both eyes will focus correctly. Another good tool to use is a field guide, and field guides can come in all different kind of shapes, sizes, types. I recommend, so this one has birds of North America, so it's going to have a huge range of birds. So if you're just starting off, I would recommend looking at kind of limiting down what kinds of birds you're looking at. So take out some of your options, because if you're not going to bird in, Brazil or Central America or different places, you don't need to have all of the, Australian birds, especially if it's a different flyway from what we're in. So if you were to go to like the East Australian flyway, it's going to have all sorts of different types of birds that we're not going to see in our backyards or in Kansas. So I'd say if you're just starting out as a bird watcher, really kind of focus in on what kinds of birds. So birds of Kansas is a really good one to start with. Or if you go to a nature center, like the Kansas Wetlands Education Center, a lot of times these nature centers will give away free field guides. And so we give one out to visitors, especially if they ask. And so this would be the Great Plains water birds. So it's going to focus on just the birds you would see in the Great Plains. Now, field guides will really help you kind of narrow down different types of birds. So if we're looking at the Great Plains water birds, it's got some different categories here. So you can see it's got separated by loons, grebes, pelicans, bitterns, and so they categorize them. What I love about the Birds of Kansas book is it separates them out by color. So especially if you've never seen that bird before, how would you go about identifying that bird? And so it's got birds that are mostly black, birds that are mostly black and white, birds that are mostly blue, and then you can kind of flip to those birds. So I told you about my little yellow jumping balls this morning. So if I go to the section all the way in the back, so if I go to the section on yellow, oh, the first bird that pops up is that American goldfinch. And we talked about how the male and the female might have different characteristics. Some birds the male will look just like the female. So there's some birds that won't have any differences and some that will. And so you can see the male goldfinch has kind of like that little black cap. The female is still pretty yellow, but more of a dull yellow color and don't stand out quite as much. But then you can go on to other yellow birds and really kind of help kind of narrow down your options. And so I would say field guide wise, if it were me picking out a new field guide, or especially if I was just starting, see what you can get for free to take with you. Pocket guides are meant to, fit in your pockets. They're very transportable, and take them with you. So you can take them, your binoculars, get in your car and go see some really neat places. But other field guides are great for if you want to see just what else is out there. So we have 475 bird species in Kansas, but birds have wings and they travel all over, and there are all sorts of different birds to go and discover. The last thing I want to leave you with is just a really great resource to learn how to identify birds and to learn more about different birds. It's just go to allaboutbirds.org. It's put on by the Cornell Labs. It's a website. It's free. I'll walk you through a few of those different things. It's just a really great place just to learn more about birds and how to ID them. So we'll start with just kind of showing you what it might offer. So let's go to that American avocet. It's our logo bird for our center. The bird you can see, especially in the summer, so spring, so between kind of mid-March, end of March, probably closer end of March, all through April, and then the summer, we can see this bird. So the American avocet, if you click on it, gives you all sorts of information about the birds you want to learn more about. And I did say bird calls was one way to birds, especially if maybe you go birding at night. Nocturnal birds of prey, like your owl species, they have some really neat calls. And so that's a really good way to get into bird watching as well, is just to listen to different calls. But you can listen to what their sounds are. You can see what the adult looks like in breeding plumage. So a breeding adult, both males and females will have that rust-colored neck, but the female tends to actually be more striking, and their bill is longer. And so that's just kind of how they attract that male species, because shorebirds tend to be more promiscuous than other birds. They will have multiple male mates. And so they will have multiple male partners, lay an egg with that male, and then make the male take care of the egg, and then she'll go find another partner to reproduce with. And so a really good adaptation for shorebirds. And so, like I said, the non-breeding plumage, I think they look a little funny. It's kind of like that black and white cartoon. But then you can see videos also. I said that the videos of them feeding is pretty neat, how they sweep their bills from side to side. It's just a really great website. They work very hard at getting food, using their bills for that. And then just all sorts of information as to, again, what's their map. One way to determine if the bird you saw is actually what you think it might be is to look, can this bird actually be found in my area? So it'll give you the common name, scientific name of the bird, order and family, what habitat it might live in, what food it eats, where it would nest, any special behaviors it has, and then is this a bird, is it endangered, is it threatened? The American avocet is of low concern, so has good population numbers. And it'll just give you some more information, cool facts, and then you can go to ID info to really help you get an idea, again, of what it looks like, how you don't confuse it with similar species. Size, so we talked about one way is to identify by size of bird. So is it, sparrow size, robin size, crow size, and so on. Okay, then another place, so that's just a really good place to go to learn more about the bird you saw, learn about its behaviors, learn about what the color would look like between males and females, breeding season, non-breeding season. But a really good place to go if you don't know what bird you're looking at is this bird ID feature here. And it will take you to kind of a different website, Merlin. If you haven't been on here before, it will ask you to kind of give your email and do that. But again, it's free. So we said, could the bird you saw be found at in this location, but also this time of year? Because birds migrate. If you saw that, an American avocet in December, it might be like, I don't think you saw that at Cheyenne Bottoms. And so they'll kind of question, are you sure that's the bird you think it is? So let's try to identify a bird here. Let's pick, I don't think we've looked at blue today. So this would, I don't know if this will work. Let's just see. Well, this is a pretty common bird in a lot of backyards. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but you might know. So let's enter the city and the state. So can this bird be seen at Cheyenne? Let's go with Hays, Kansas. All right, did we see the bird today? Sure. All right, so what size was the bird? Let's look at, would you consider that bird to be sparrow-sized, robin-sized, crow-sized, or goose-sized? I'm going to say probably robin-sized with this bird. Maybe robin-sized, maybe between robin and crow. I'm going to go more towards robin-sized. Okay, what are the main colors of this bird? It wants you to select 1 to 3 colors. So definitely a lot of blue, some white, some black. Let's see what possibilities I get. Oh, also remember that habitat. Could I expect to see that bird somewhere? So I'm going to say I saw this bird on the ground. So it's creating a list of possibilities. Oh, my first list of possibilities to pop up is the correct bird. I'd say that's what it is, right? So blue jay. So again, just a really good resource to help you identify birds. Can point out what else you might have seen, just to really kind of help you narrow down some options. So could it be a European starling? European starlings, birders hate these birds because they're non-native. They're not native to the United States. They're not native to Kansas, and they can be bully birds also. So they can kind of definitely overtake feeders. There are some birds that will parasite nests, lay their eggs in the nest and kick out native birds and make the native bird raise their young. European starlings, I do like the story of how they came over. A guy wanted to introduce all of the birds that were mentioned in Shakespeare plays to Central Park. And so he brought over some European starlings, and they were very successful in the United States, and they're now seen all over in huge numbers. So very successful introduction to the United States. So cliff swallows have the blue on them, but definitely not what we saw here. But just again, a really great resource to help you narrow down some things. And again, listen to those calls. So when you learn about a bird, look at its picture, but also listen to what it sounds like. So next time you can go out into the field and identify the bird just by the call. All right, Tigers. So I hope that you take up the hobby of bird watching. I hope that you come and see us at Cheyenne Bottoms in the Kansas Wetlands Education Center. And the most important thing is to just get out and explore your area, be outside, enjoying nature, and maybe learn about a few of the species that are in your backyard or in Kansas or wherever you're from. So I hope that you pick up the hobby of bird watching. Thanks.